Representatives earlier. We're back with the ranking member of the House Intelligence Committee, Democratic Congressman Adam Schiff of California. I know you strongly support this compromise version that the House passed, now the Senate passed, now the President says he will sign it into law. But the collection of all this bulk data, it's not going to be retained by telecommunications firms, whether AT&T or Verizon or whatever. But there's no limit how long they have to keep this information, is there? They could get rid of it in 6 weeks or 6 months, whatever they want.
Well, there's a FCC requirement that they hold onto their data for 18 months. And I think the practice has been for many of them to hold it for considerably longer than that. But you're right, Wolf, apart from that FCC requirement, which may not cover the full range of what we're talking about, there is no legal requirement. That was something that was debated in the Senate and earlier in the House. But a retention mandate was something that the technology companies strongly opposed, and it was not a part of this legislation.
There were multiple threats made against airlines today, over the weekend. These bomb threats, if you will, none of them have proven to be credible, but it's just a continuation of what we've seen in recent weeks. Congressman Peter King, one of your Republican colleagues, told us recently that there has been some ISIS chatter about carrying out these types of hoax bomb threats in order to disrupt U.S. airlines, maybe even as a way to test the response if they're planning something much more sinister, deadly. What do you know about these hoaxes, these threats?
Well, I would say a couple things. I think Peter is right that ISIS, Al-Qaeda, they know how much they can disrupt our lives, how much they can distract law enforcement, intelligence community resources by posting things, just urging people to attack, or posting lists of military personnel, or taking other steps that maybe they have no intention of following through on, but nonetheless occupy a lot of our time, energy, and resources. At the same time, you have other people, frankly, quite sick people, who get some kind of a perverse kick out of these hoaxes. And you might remember, Wolf, long before these recent threats of bombing aircraft, how many anthrax phony hoaxes there were. In fact, we took up legislation to try to raise the penalties for those who commit these hoaxes. So they've been with us for a long time. We're seeing a new iteration, but we're also, as you mentioned, seeing, I think, terror groups recognize they can disrupt us and distract us by these hoaxes.
And if it's just a bunch of jerks out there, or a jerk thinking he's having or she's having some fun, they may not realize this is a serious crime, Congressman. This is a felony. They could go to jail for a long time, right?
Oh, absolutely, because the degree to which it disrupts law enforcement, the costs, even these idle threats over the phone, and some of them I think have been traced domestically in the past, they put law enforcement to great costs, and obviously are quite nerve-wracking for the personnel involved.
Our Pentagon correspondent, Congressman Barbara Starr, is reporting that the Pentagon is now investigating whether live anthrax was actually brought into the Pentagon building itself. There's been a huge uproar in recent days over the fact that live anthrax apparently was sent to various U.S. military bases, including a military base in Korea, maybe in Australia. What can you tell us about this? It's very disturbing.
Well, it is very disturbing, and I think that investigation is still going on, so there's not a lot I can add at this point, but you're absolutely right. I guess these samples were widely dispersed. It was felt that they were inert, and I guess there are indications that not all of them were. So I'm not sure how this happened, but you can imagine the consternation on the receiving end as well as on the sending end when it was learned that some of these samples may have been live anthrax.
Very disturbing. Let's talk a little bit about ISIS right now. As you know, there's a coalition of countries, including the United States, of course, meeting in Paris today to talk about how to fight ISIS, especially in Iraq and Syria. The central Iraqi government is there. Haider al-Abadi, the prime minister, is attending. But it's pretty shocking, at least to me, and I want to get your reaction, that no representatives, Kurdish representatives from Kurdistan, who are obviously the Peshmerga fighters, they're fighting ISIS in northern Iraq, they were simply not even invited. They were not brought along by the government of Iraq, the government of Haider al-Abadi. Should they have been included in this meeting of this coalition partners determining ways to fight ISIS?
I certainly think they should have been included. They've been playing a vital role in Iraq as well as in Syria. As you might imagine, there may have been Iraqi sensitivities worried about in giving them a seat at the table as if they were an independent country. Similarly, the Turks may have been concerned about having a presence there. But nonetheless, these groups like the Kurds that are doing the fighting, doing the dying out there, I think deserve to be represented. And this is something that I think we have to push very hard on more generally, Wolf, and that is the Iraqi government in particular needs to make efforts to fully bring in the Kurds and the Sunnis, to make sure that both are armed well and have the capacity to fight ISIS, and in particular with respect to the Sunnis, until we can persuade those Sunni tribes to peel away from ISIS, this war against ISIS is never going to be finished.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are quickly losing a whole lot of confidence in this new Iraqi government. If today's example of preventing the Kurds from attending this coalition meeting in Paris is an example, they got a lot of work to do to reassure the world that they're part of the problem, part of the solution rather than part of the problem there. Congressman, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, Wolf.
Coming up, the U.S.